In case any of you are wondering which one of us is Lance Berkman, that would be him. Hey, welcome. I'm Tom Douthit. I'm with Toolbox, and it's our privilege to have Lance with us today the way that Mike had just introduced. So it's great to have you guys here with us as well. And we hope that what goes on here today really is a building block for you. I mean, we're always laying bricks in our lives, kind of building one thing on another. And so the reason we do this, it's fun to come and hear from guys and be a part of another man's, kind of get to listen into another man's world. But we really do hope that it breathes into yours. It's a part of building us. So, Lance, thanks a ton for being here today. I mean, this is fantastic for us.
My pleasure. Glad to be here. Yeah.
Good. So, Mike gave a few of your accolades, and there's a lot more. I mean, 6-time All-Star, 15th season, Astros Hall of Fame, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty amazing, the list. So let's talk baseball first, okay? In fact, can we talk Astros first?
Sure.
All right, here we are, 2.5 games out of first at this point in the game. At this point in the season, any predictions, insights, betting advice? No, not right now. We don't do that.
Well, I will say if the Astros can make the playoffs, they have a great shot. No matter, even if it's a wild card or obviously it's easier if you win the division. But even as a wild card entrant, because of their previous experience and success and the guys that they have, I mean they're, sometimes as a player you look around and you're like, if we can just get there, we have a real shot. Yeah. And that happened to us a couple times in my career. So I know that's what those guys are thinking. And if they can just make it, then, they've got a team that can win it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Any special talent on that team that you go, man, I just love that guy. I love the way they play. Love his spirit. Love his,
Yeah, I mean, Altuve to me is like the heart and soul of that. And it's just a, great Astro, great guy. He never had a bad day. I mean, when you're around him, he just sort of exudes this joy of playing the game, and he does it right. And he's a humble guy. He's obviously accomplished a lot, and but you would never know it from being around him. He's just a regular guy. So
yeah, oh, that's great. So one of the ways I often describe what we do at Toolbox is we get to listen over to the fence into another man's world. So you've experienced a lot of kind of things that a lot of us never will, And so I remember watching this deal on ESPN one time where they were comparing, what's the most frightening thing in sports. And so the conversation on that day was, would you rather take a shot from an NFL defensive lineman, or would you rather stand in and face a 100-mile-an-hour fastball? And most of the guys on there said, oh, I'd much rather take the shot from the lineman that had that ball coming at me. Is that right? I mean, talk to us about living in that world.
Yeah, no, I mean, the most frightening thing in sports is in the World Series, like when the game's on the line and there's 50,000 people screaming and your at-bat is the one that determines whether or not you win or lose. And so that is way more frightening than any sort of physical pain, because you can deal with that as an athlete. But the mental anguish that comes it's indescribable. And I always joke around, like if kids really understood what it felt like to be in that moment, they would never play that game in the backyard where it's like bottom of the ninth, 2 out. You would never play that. I mean, but I will have to say, like the thing about you really never feel like you're in danger in the batter's box because those guys are good. I mean, they got great control, and I've talked to parents all the time, and they want to know about their son, what, kind of when you make that transformation. I always tell parents, when your son is more concerned about making an out than he is about being hit with the ball, then you have a baseball player. So, for me, it's like, I mean, getting hit by the pitch is a free base. It helps your on base percentage and that kind of thing. So, I never thought about it. So.
That's pretty great. Oh my gosh. So you excelled at every level, like, high school, college at Rice, Major League Baseball with the Astros mainly, and then those other two teams that we've mentioned a moment ago. So, of all the games, all the seasons, all the teams, are there some stories that stand out, or, a favorite game or experience or person or et cetera? The things?
Oh, man, I mean, I could probably spend the rest of the time talking about that sort of thing. But, at the end of the day, I think really what you take away from the game is it's the people and the relationships that you develop over the course of a career like that. I always do kind of if I ever am not being interviewed and sort of give a speech, you think about think about your own family. Like how many people here knew their grandfather, and you can raise your hand. How many people knew their great grandfather? A handful. How about your great great grandfather? I mean, nobody, right? So within 3 generations, you're gone and nobody remembers jack squat, And the other thing, I have a list of names that I could read you, and I'd be like, has anybody ever heard of these guys? And without a doubt, unless there's some real baseball nerd in the crowd, nobody raises their hand, and they're all Hall of Fame. They're in the Hall of Fame, in the Baseball Hall of Fame. That Bid McPhee, has anybody ever heard of that guy? Considered the greatest barehanded second baseman of all time. I mean, so my point is, no matter what you accomplish, it's just fleeting. I mean, it's just temporary. So, I'm in a Bible study now with Dwight Edwards, who I think is here, and one thing he likes to say is, there's only 2 things that last. It's the Word of God and the souls of men. And so anything that you accomplish, it just pales in comparison to the relationships and to, the people that you interact with. So, I mean, my greatest takeaway from my career is my, friendship with guys like Andy Pettitte or Matt Holliday or Adam Wainwright, who's just retiring, and, just guys that I love to be around, love to play with, and just they're great. And that's a very short list, and there are many, many more. Chris Burke is another guy that, maybe nobody's ever heard of, but he did play for the Astros for a while, had a big home run for us. So it's just, you think about those relationships more than anything else.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so how about baseball-wise?
Well, baseball-wise, there's a couple things that stand out. One would be the Home Run Derby in 2004, which I had participated in one in 2002 and didn't do very well. And then 2004, the All-Star Game was here in Houston, and so, I hit right-handed, actually, in that Derby. And so I ended up being a finished runner-up to Miguel Tejada, but that whole experience where the crowd was going absolutely bananas, and, you're launching balls out of the ballpark, it's pretty fun. But obviously the 2 World Series teams I played on, 05 Astros and the 11 Cardinals. Game 6 of the 2011 World Series was probably the craziest, best game, maybe ever. We got to be a part of that. So those are moments that stand out, and the pinnacle of that is obviously winning the World Series. It's something that, it's really indescribable, the emotion and the feeling of accomplishment that you get when something like that happens to you.
Yeah, I'm sure of it. You probably thought about that since you were a little kid, so it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and you just can't even get your mind around it. I just remember when the final out was made and you see the ball going out to left field, and I knew that Alan Craig was out there, he was going to catch it, and it's like, we just won the World Series. Like, you just can't even, we are the best team in the universe right now, and it's so big that you can't even hardly believe that you could do it, so.
Oh, that's outstanding. So, actually, you talked about fleeting. I don't know. Maybe we can throw out a little crowd quiz here real quick. I pulled up. You were part of the Killer Bees.
Yeah, not original. That was sort of that's what a lot of people don't realize. The original Killer Bees were Sean Berry, third baseman, Derek Bell, Bagwell, and Biggio. Those 4 guys back in the late '90s Astrodome days, and then I came after that, and because my last name happened to start with a B, they just kind of lumped me in there, and it became sort of a goofy deal. But
well, Wikipedia puts a few other B's in there too. So you, and then Eric Brunlett, Brendan Bakke, Carlos Beltran, and Chris Burke.
Well, that's the second iteration. I guess those are the baby bees that came after I
think you should send all those guys a note to let them know that they're the baby bees.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good. Well, hey, roll us back. So one of the things I love to hear about is how a guy ends up being who he is and doing what he does. So I'd love to roll back the clock just to hear a little bit about your growing up, and what were some of the things that really shaped you? What were some of the people that shaped you? How'd you end up coming to Rice? Anything like that. Just help us before you stepped onto the big stage. Let us know a little bit about your world.
Well, I always tell people that as a kid, I overcame a drug problem. My parents drugged me to church every time the doors opened. So, I feel like we were there. I'll never forget one. Because back in the day, I grew up in the Church of Christ, which is like to the right of Baptist, so that's created some hangups for sure. But I'll never forget one, because we went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and then you had youth group on one of the other nights, and so you felt like you were always up there. And I remember as a kid, my dad, it was a Wednesday night, and he came home from work, and I was like, expecting to go to church, and he said, "No, we're gonna go shoot baskets." So we had this neighborhood, and there was a basketball court sort of in the middle of the neighborhood, a community park. So we just walked down there, and I just remember thinking, freedom, this is incredible. I cannot believe that that my dad's going to let me play basketball and not go to church. So that was I don't know why that stands out, but it was amazing. And so obviously my parents had a huge part in shaping my upbringing, and not everybody has the advantage of being in a stable situation like that. And I think the family is so important, and the family unit is so important, and we're blessed not because we're great people, but just I think circumstance allowed for, like, there's no divorce in my family. Like, my grandparents are married for 50 years on both sides. Like, my aunts and uncles, it's like, and so just having that modeled for you growing up and being in such a stable situation is very helpful. And then my dad, obviously from a baseball standpoint, he was sort of a baseball psycho, still is. I remember, he tells a story, like he said, he realized that I was going to be a left-handed thrower because I would finish my bottle and, throw it out of the crib left-handed. And then when I could walk, he got me out in the backyard with one of those little red Snoopy bats, and I wanted to hit right-handed. And so he was like, well, this is an odd combination. If you know about baseball, if you throw left-handed, you're limited in the positions that you can play. And the right-handed hitters, especially back then, are a dime a dozen. We're all over the place. So he said, I figured if you could throw left-handed, you ought to be able to hit left-handed. So literally from the time I could walk, he had me switch hitting, and would take me out in the backyard and, work with me on my left-handed swing, and then made me hit left-handed one at-bat, right-handed one at-bat, all the way until I got to high school. So he was instrumental, obviously, and I spent many, many Saturdays arguing with him at our batting cage. We had this. Him and another dad went in and bought a batting cage out on a piece of property that was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was 1 billion degrees every time we'd go out there, and and cedar trees everywhere, and the heat that comes in from there, and we'd just hit for hours on the weekends, and back then that was, now there's a batting cage, it seems like, on every corner, but back then that was kind of unusual. And I just remember these wars that we would get into, because he wouldn't be happy with something that I would, and I'd get so frustrated with him, and but that time together and him just sort of shaping my swing and me as a baseball player were, that's really what made me into the hitter that I became. He would always, Dad's kind of a passive aggressive guy, and he would, he'd say things like, if you want to be great, you got to be willing to pay the price. And I bet old so-and-so is, practicing today when you're going to fall behind if you don't practice also. And he would come home from work, and he hung a tire, like a big, just a regular tire like you'd put on a sedan, from a tree, like a tire swing, and he made me hit it 50 swings left-handed, 50 swings right-handed, like every other day. And hitting that tire helps you develop your power, and we could go into the mechanics of it, but bottom line is, when you hit that tire, you better be ready for the impact, because if not, the bat will come back to you, and you really got to drive through it. And so my regimen was 50 swings left-handed, 50 swings right-handed off the tire, and then I would hit the tee in the garage. He set up a net in our garage, and I had to do 50 swings left-handed, 50 swings right-handed off the tee every other day. So I did that for years growing up, to the point where he would squirt me with a water gun in the morning to wake me up, because I played all the sports, when I was in middle school especially, and I would be too tired after basketball practice or football practice. So he made me hit before school, and that way, I'd get my swings in and then, come back. So anyway, psycho dad, like I said, but...
You dance with young kids taking notes?
Yeah. But I had my, anybody who's seen that 10,000 hour rule? I had my 10,000 hours in by the time I was about 12. So, anyway, but he's great, continues to be one of my biggest supporters, and has been a wonderful father and a father figure to have. So I owe a lot of who I am to him. And then when I went to Rice, I played for Coach Graham, who's kind of like your angry grandfather that hates your guts. And, part of baseball is like two things, it's skill and then there's your mentality. And you got to be, baseball is weird because it's not like football or basketball where there's just this great physical toll that takes place. It's the mental drain. It's like every day, and it's like death by 1,000 cuts. And so to be a successful professional, like you got to really be tough mentally. You got to be able to handle failure. You got to be able to kind of look death in the face on a daily basis, so to speak, and be able to compete. And I tell guys, if you can't hit in the fetal position, then you can't play in the big leagues because, about 3/4 of the time I'm up there like, oh, gosh, you're so scared to make it go away. But, you still got to perform. So, Coach Graham was instrumental in helping me grow up as a competitor. So I really give my dad a lot of credit, for work ethic and for the skill development. But then when I got to Rice, I kind of got a PhD in mental toughness from who I consider the master of it, Coach Graham, and then that helped me as I went on into my into my minor and major league career.
Let me just drill down there. So when he did that, when Coach Graham was pushing you in that way, is that like personal?
Very
he's
personal.
Coming up and just bringing it
to
you.
Well, his couple of things. I'll tell you a couple of Coach Graham stories. One, one of his favorite things to say was, "You're the worst recruiting mistake I've ever made." And he also said, "Why don't you crawl back in your mother's womb because that's the only place you'll be safe." Stuff like that. This story. There's one story that sort of illustrates. Well, there's actually two, but one I don't know if I want to tell it. But the one story that I like to tell that illustrates kind of Coach Graham in a nutshell was we were playing Baylor. This was back, of course, I played in the Southwest Conference. If y'all remember that, I love the Southwest Conference. It was so great. But we were playing Baylor, and back in those days it was you play a Friday night game, then you had a doubleheader on Saturday, and then you'd play a Sunday day game. So. A lot of baseball in 3 days, and so the Saturday game, it was a 7-inning game and a 9-inning game, doubleheader. So the 7-inning game took about 4.5 hours to play, and the final score was 21-18. Baylor won, and the play that sort of set them up for their victory was my freshman year. I played left field, and then when we had a first baseman that also pitched, and when he would go into pitch, I would come in to play first base. So we had put this guy into pitch. I'd come into first base. They get their leadoff hitter on, and they had this other guy that was a lefty, and he turned on a ball. So I'm holding the guy on first base, and he turns on this ball, and he hits an absolute rocket shot, like ground ball, but a rocket shot. And I felt like, in my mind, and I still to this day swear, I felt like I laid down in front of this ball to try to keep it from going into the outfield, but it just got on me too quick, and it got under my glove, and it went into the outfield. So instead of having one out at least, maybe even a double play, now it's first and third, nobody out. They ended up scoring 3 runs. They win the game. So at this point, I'm like, we let up 21 runs, it's not my fault that they scored. What about the other 18 runs, And so, but we get down there, and it's 1 billion degrees, and we still have a 9-inning game to play. So he gets us down the right field line, and of course, we did, after every game, he would chew us out, and win or lose. And so we're down there, and the thing about Coach Graham was you kind of wanted, if you were going to get chewed out, you wanted it to be on the front end of his speech, because by the time he got to the back end, he was really worked up. And and it was like, so he starts, and he had a lot of stuff that day, and it was like, and I remember I'm sitting Indian style in the front row there, and I kind of had my head down, and I'm thinking like, we got to get ready to play this next game. And offensively, I had a good game. I had like 5 RBIs and a couple of hits and whatever, so I think I'm in the clear. And all of a sudden, he goes, "And Mr. Berkman." And I was like, oh my gosh, what is he going to say? And he went from sort of this raging speech to this like psycho calm. And then that's when you knew you were really in trouble. And he said, "How many of you guys here have read The Scarlet Letter?" And we're like, "What?" And, but it was Rice, so all of us had, so we all put our hands up. And so he said, he goes, "Well, for those of you idiots that haven't read it, there's a story about this lady back in the colonial days, and she commits adultery, and the townsfolk get together and they sew a big red letter A on the front of all of her dresses because they want everybody to know that she's an adulteress. Well, Mr. Berkman, I'm going to petition the NCAA and see if they'll let me sew a big red letter C on the front of your jersey because you're nothing but a coward." And then he went on to this like how could you let that ball get through you? And, that was the key to the game and all. And I'm sitting there, and I'm a freshman. I'm the only freshman that's playing, and I'm like, devastated. And so I'm Indian style, and I got my head down. He got down on his hands and knees so he could scream up into my face underneath my hat. So, and then he was like, all right, we got to get ready to play the second game, which we ended up winning, thank the Lord. But anyway, that's kind of Coach Graham in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Oh, that's amazing. Wow. So that's great. So Mike mentioned it when he was introducing you a minute ago. You've already alluded to it, but that part of the defining reality of who Lance Berkman is, central core, is that you've been publicly identified and clear as a follower of Christ for a long time, right? So tell us a little bit about that journey. You told us about being drugged to church as a kid, but really, what are the things that have brought you along and some defining moments in that way? And
yeah, I mean, for me, it kind of came together. And by the way, you just gotta. I remember one time I was teaching a Bible study when I was with the Astros, and we, of course, when you're in pro ball, the guys come from all over, and so we were in there, and we had a couple guys from California, and I was like, I referenced Noah's Ark, which is to me the most basic Bible story. Even the rankest pagan non-believer has Noah's Ark in his nursery, growing up. So I figured like everybody knows Noah's Ark, and I look over there, and these guys from California have this weird look on their face, like, what are you talking about? I was like, you never heard of Noah's Ark? Are you dead serious? Give me a break. So my point in saying that is I did not have that upbringing. I had a very good biblical upbringing with, all the stories and all the deal. Baptized when I was 11, kind of really, and that's when I felt like I became a believer. Even I felt the kind of the weight of my sin. And in the Church of Christ, that's not hard because they let you know about it literally every Sunday. So I figured, I got to escape hell first and foremost, so I better go ahead and get baptized, which I did. But as I grew kind of in my faith, and then you get on into college, and you start to, one reason I love being a college coach is because I remember in that stage, like when you leave your parents' home and you're out on your own for the first time, and you realize that, oh, I've got to make my own decisions, and then you start to like, well, is this stuff that I've been brought up with, is it really true? Like, is it, I know I grew up in the church, but I'm seeing a lot of other things, and maybe this isn't true, and so then you start to kind of wander a little bit. And I was really more concerned about being a baseball player than anything else at that time in my life, and that was the most important thing. So I started, doing the things that baseball players did. And I had some buddies, and this process sort of started later in high school. I had a good group of friends in high school, but our language was atrocious, as most young men probably is. And we would drop F-bombs like it was, didn't think anything of it, just like we were breathing, but we knew that, hey, we probably shouldn't be talking like that because we wouldn't say it in front of our mothers. So, we shouldn't be doing that. And we wanted to be good, so we came up with this scheme. We're like, okay, if you catch your buddy saying a cuss word, you can punch him as hard as you want to, and so in the arm, not in the face. But, and so I just remember thinking, everybody was walking around and, just with dead arm, like that's all that happened. Like nobody stopped cussing. We just walked around with bruised, arms. And it occurred to me later, and I'm telling that story to kind of set this up, like when I got to college, I was in that mode where it was just like, faith was sort of nominal. Faith was like what I'd been brought up with, knew all the facts. But and in my heart of hearts, which I kind of hate that phrase. I can't believe I just used it. But kind of at the core of my being, I felt like I was a believer. But my life certainly wasn't reflecting that. So I had my sophomore year, so freshman year was kind of like trying to survive Coach Graham and, really trying to establish myself as a college player. And then my sophomore year, we recruited this guy named Jake Baker. And at that point in my life, I had this vision of Christianity and guys that were Christians, like really like born again. That was sort of an anathema to me at that point, like that phrase, like because that connotated some mealy-mouthed, weak guy that sits in the corner of the library and reads his Bible all the time. And it was so unattractive, that mental image that I had of what Christianity was about or what being a born-again believer was all about. And I just totally rejected it because it was like, I don't want to do, like I'm a dude, like I'm a baseball player, big tough guy or whatever. So I thought that until I saw Jake. And this dude comes in, and his dad played 6 years in the NFL back when a clothesline was considered a good tackle. It was like 63 to 69 or something. I mean, this guy 6'5", 260 in his prime. He's 83 years old. I'm still scared of him. Like, I can outrun him now, but, if he got a hold of me, he'd kill me. And that was Jake's dad, and Jake is this real dude. Like, he's tough, he's strong, he comes in the weight room, like, throwing big weight around. He was really a football player and kind of got halfway recruited to play baseball, decided that's what he wanted to do. But we became, like, instant friends, and I was like, that's the kind of guy I want to be around. And then as I was around him more, I got to, man, this guy, he doesn't talk like we talk, doesn't look at the things that we look at. And thank the Lord we didn't have cell phones back then because, the challenges today are just off the chain. But, you could still find bad things if you were looking for them, which we were often. And so, but we couldn't even get him, like we used to try to get him to do bad stuff just to validate, I think, what we were doing. But he never would, and he was a great guy, and I loved him, and like I said, we were like almost instantaneously best friends. And so I got to looking at his life, and he's not perfect by any means, but there was a quality to his life that was different, and I thought, this guy is a real believer. Like, not only is he claiming Christ, but he's actually living like you're supposed to live in college when, there's no parameters here. Like, you can do whatever you want. And it really impressed me, made a big impression. And I thought, man, this guy can whip your butt. He's tough as nails, but he loves the Lord. So, of course, that coupled with my upbringing, there was really an epiphany there where I thought, I got to get off the fence. I got to quit living like this and claiming this, or quit claiming this and just, free for all. So, thankfully, I feel like the right choice. Came over on the other side of and it was one of the things that happened like immediately, which is I'm not charismatic. The supernatural stuff, sometimes I get wigged out by it, in certain Christian circles, but I can't deny the power of God. But one thing that's happened to me personally, it was like I went from having a foul mouth, and the reason I told that story before, to I never struggled with language the rest of my life. I don't know that I've ever uttered another cuss word, even though I've managed to get kicked out of about 8 major league games without profanity, which is a pretty good accomplishment, I think. And look, I sometimes I hesitate to tell that, especially in a room full of guys, because that's not what Christianity is about. Like that if you struggle with that, whatever. I'm not like, that's not the measure of your Christianity, is whether or not you cuss or not. But for me, it just changed, and so it was, to me, that was like real evidence of a heart change, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And before, we were trying to fix ourselves with these external motivators, but really the true change happened when my heart changed.
Yeah,
so
I love that. It's something that happened from the inside out, not because someone's
punching you. Yeah. So the motivation then became love and not like fear of punishment, which I'd grown up and obviously in a denomination that loves the fear of punishment. But that was my first experience with like God loves you, and now He's inside of you, working from the inside out. So I don't know, like, my conversion experience is a lot more like Peter than Paul. Paul had this incredible, like, moment of boom. All of a sudden, he goes from being a non-believer to a believer, and, like, he can point to the very moment on the road to Damascus when that happened and was baptized immediately. Mine happened over a course of years, because I don't doubt my conversion at 11 years old, because I have vivid memories of that, feeling that weight and wanting to unburden myself of the sin problem that we all have. And I know that happened when I was 11, but I don't think I really got the gospel or started to get the gospel until I got to college and had this interaction with Jake and just through his example. And then, of course, I always tell people I like Jake so much that I married his sister. So he ended up, we ended up being roommates, and he had a picture of his family. The first time I ever saw my wife, I was like, man, your sister's good looking. And at the time, I was sort of just trying to get his goat a little bit, and I said, I think I'm going to marry your sister. And he's like, give me that picture, But ended up, I did marry her. So Jake kind of started it, and my wife has certainly taken over in that, in the refining role of as all wives do for us. And we're not necessarily always happy about it, but they do a great job of letting us know when we screw up. And so then, just being in that family with the Bakers has been a real blessing. And, I have other brother-in-laws that are committed believers. And it's just, so that community that I entered into at that time of my life was really important for me in my faith journey. And look, guys, at the end of the day, like, I've screwed up big time in several areas, it's not like been this, oh, well, I figured it out in college and then it's just been this free run ever since. No, there's been serious ups and downs, some serious downs that kind of mold you and make you, and I think it's God's refining process to take you to who he wants you to ultimately be. So don't mishear me. It's not like this, the Christian life is hard, and trying to live. I mean, that's why Jesus many, many times is like, count the cost, don't do this. It's almost like Jesus is the worst evangelist because he's like, are you really sure you want to do this? Don't do this. I'm telling you, I'm warning you, this is tough, and it is. And so anyway, but it's been there's no doubt, like the advantage of having experienced a lot of the things that this world values, whether it be fame or accomplishment or money, or it's just you realize what really matters. And all that stuff is just, like the Bible says, it's dross. I mean, it's like stuff that gets burned away, and there's no lasting satisfaction. And I've done this myself. I mean, when I retired in 2013, I went through a real dark period where, I would have told you as a believer that my identity wasn't in the game of baseball, but it was, and when that was taken away, I was, and still to this day, like I feel like I still struggle with it, but you just like, who am I? What am I doing here? What's my purpose? This thing was so important. It was so huge, and now it's not there anymore. And you just kind of start grasping around. And so all of us do this, but we often put the weight of expectation on things that can't bear it, whether it be, even your family, even good things, or whether it be accomplishment or fame or money or sex, or we put this weight on it, and it will always disappoint. It cannot bear the weight. There's only one person that can, and it's Jesus. So and there's a difference between knowing that and like really experiencing it. I'm the kind of guy, I like vacillate back and forth. Like I know it, then I'll get a little glimpse of experience, and then I'll go back to being more like, this is more of a theological exercise in my mind than it is in my heart, but that it always, comes back into the core of your being. So I think that's the Christian walk. I think that's the challenge, the fighting, the good fight of faith that happens when you become a believer.
I don't know if you can put this into words or not, but so I'm always interested to kind of get into, sort of working out faith in the moment. Mm-hmm. Like, all right, all of a sudden my identity feels threatened. I know I'm not baseball, or I know I'm not engineering, or I know I'm not entrepreneurship or whatever. I know I'm not that. But all of a sudden I feel like I am, mm-hmm. And so a lot of times faith is kind of this, it's bigger than that, but there's a self-talk that goes, you've got to speak to yourself to move yourself from that place to the other. Can you take us at all into what you do when you recognize it, or how you respond when you feel those things pressing on you as a guy who knows and follows Christ?
Yeah, the Holy Spirit speaks to me, and it sounds a lot like my wife. Usually. For me, one of my favorite concepts is to like put your faith into practice. And I tell my kids this, it's like, this is where the rubber meets the road. There's your intellectual faith, and then there's like your real faith is like, what do you do when, you're in the grease, so to speak, and where do you turn, and how do you, you have to use your faith, like put it into practice, or else it just becomes a theological exercise, and it is of no real value. So I think like real faith, and it's not easy because, heck, the Psalms are full of David, like, exhorting himself, like, talking to his own soul, hey, shake it off, or get out of this rut that you're in, or let's, remember this great thing that happened, and, that gives us the strength to carry on. And so I think it's really about eternal perspective, and there's these checks along the way that you just... when I first took this job at HCU, I was like, I'm going to be the greatest college coach. And, you kind of have this, I'm going to go in there, and this place has never really had a winning tradition, and we're going to build a winning tradition. And the first year we won 18 games, and last year we won 11 games. We've gotten worse. And so, as part of that, that's a kind of an ego blow. But at the same time, it's a great check because, like, why are you doing this? Are you doing this to like further your own name and win more baseball games, or do you recognize that you have a real opportunity to speak into these young men's lives at a critical time? And so making, like, I felt like I was kind of majoring in the minor, and now like this year I'm really like, I don't know if we're going to win a game, but these guys are going to hear the gospel. Like, they're going to be exposed to truth as I know it, as the Bible teaches it. And so, that's I don't know if that even answers your question,
great.
But that's kind of.
It's perfect. That's such a real life. The way I think about it a lot of times is is I like try to set my spiritual thermostat, just like there's a thermostat watching this room, and as soon as it hits like 72 degrees or whatever it is, something kicks, something turns. And, at the same time when we're fighting with identity or whatever the beast that has our number is, for me, maybe it's anxiety or maybe it's anger. And like, so I want to set my spiritual thermostat to watch that so that when I get that first little spray of adrenaline that's a part of that I flip at that moment and like, all right, God, I can feel it going on because I can find it's quicker. It's easier to deal with it if I do it quicker rather than to let it sit. Turn towards him and say, God, I need your help. I need your strength. I'm wrestling with this. So it's exactly what you've done. That's great.
Yeah, and I think God, the one thing I've learned about God through some trials here in the recent months is just like He wants to hear about. Like we don't have to clean ourselves up and take then this clean image to God. He wants to meet us exactly where we are, and the love of God doesn't change based on your performance. And when you're raised, and I mean this is when when you're raised in a performance-based religion or denomination, whatever you want to call it, and you are, and who here isn't in a performance-based profession? But it like baseball, it's exacerbated because your performance is printed in the newspaper every day. Like it's there's ready access to, oh, this guy's terrible, boo. And so, but you get into this mode where your faith falls into that trap too, where it's performance-based, where I've got to do more, I've got to be better for God to accept me. But the Bible, and this is, I'd love, again, Dwight, I know you're sitting right over there, but one of the things that you said in our Bible study yesterday, which I think is phenomenal, and I never really thought about it like this, but Christianity is the only religion that promises heaven up front. Like you get the reward and then you live into that. You don't have to live a certain way and then get this reward. So like authentic Christianity is about allowing the love of God to penetrate your heart and then to overflow into other people. So that's something that, it's hard for guys. It's hard for me to, because I always want to like do more, be better, and then God will understand, or God will accept what I'm offering. But that I don't even know why we've got talking about that, but I think it's an important concept.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, that's really helpful. I mean, you have spent the majority of your life in maybe the most statistically driven endeavor in the world of baseball. I mean, stats are everywhere, so that's to watch out for that is really, really powerful. Okay, so I got two more quick questions, and then we'll see if the guys have a couple from the crowd, right? All right, so you probably have already answered this. We'll just see if there's anything else that you would say to it. Sort of the tagline to Toolbox is helping men go beyond success into significance. Does that mean anything to you? Got anything else to add on that idea of what it means to not just endeavor for success, but to go beyond it into some kind of significance?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it goes back to Word of God, souls of men. Like, the only lasting significance is our impact on other people and how we interact with God. So 3 generations from now, nobody in this room will be alive, nor will anybody remember what anybody has done, which is... That's hard for guys to think about because we want to make a lasting impact, and the problem is I think we're doing it, a lot of times in the wrong way. Because I mean, no joke. Like, what if I'd hit 750 homers? Like, who cares? Like, if you're dead for 100 years, nobody cares about that, and it doesn't mean anything to me. Like, it's not going to help me do anything or be better, or like. So you just kind of have to. And I think a big part of being a man, and we encourage our guys to do this, like self-analysis. Like, what are you doing? What are you about? And those are tough questions to answer. And trust me, I've been about the wrong things a lot in my life. And so the good thing about screwing up is okay, I shouldn't do that anymore. Like you kind of learn that doesn't work. So. I would say that if you're really the only way to find significance is through a relationship with Jesus and then allowing Christ to transform your heart in such a way that you're impacting other people, period. And you can try it other ways, but God set it up that way where it doesn't work any other way.
I love that. Okay, kind of related to that. Anytime we have this many guys in a room, there is certainly somebody, probably more than one somebody, for whom the wheels are flying off. I mean, it is the ditch, right?
Should we have them raise their hand and pray
yeah.
up? I had to run for the exit. I mean, my goodness.
But if it was you and them sitting down just talk to each other. You're a coach. What kind of coaching would you give to them?
I mean, I like to try to keep it simple. I think I really like I said, the last couple of years, the concept that God not only loves me but likes me has been something that's really, it's tough for me to get my mind around that. I mean, but that's what the Bible teaches. Like, God, not only does he love you, but he likes you. Even in your worst moment, he wants to have relationship with you, and he'll meet you right there. I mean, there's so many, and if you spend any time in the Bible, I used to believe that the Old Testament was all hellfire and brimstone, and then the New Testament was this grace, love, big teddy bear. But it's actually sometimes almost the opposite. Like the Old Testament, you can find countless glimpses of God's character, his grace, his love, his long-suffering, his forbearance with the nation of Israel, all of these things. You think about, like Jason mentioned in our Bible study the other morning, like right after Adam and Eve have really jacked it up for all of us, I mean, the very first thing that happens after they've committed this colossal sin is that the Bible says that God is walking in the garden towards them. I mean, they're hiding from God, and yet instead of a zap with a lightning bolt or you're going straight to hell, he's walking towards them to try to reestablish this fellowship. And there's consequences. I mean, I'm not here to tell you that if you're jacking around doing things you shouldn't be doing, that you're not going to experience consequences. You absolutely will. But one of those consequences is not losing the love of God. And so, that's a concept that's really difficult if you're a believer. That's a concept is really difficult for guys to get their mind around. So I would say that would be how I would coach somebody, is like, get the love of God first, understand the grace of God, and then everything else flows from there.
I love it. I love that distinction between loving us and liking us.
Yeah.
It's like he's kind of obligated to love.
Right, yeah. I mean, I love plenty of people that I don't like at all, just because I have to make myself.
Exactly.
But thank the Lord, God's not that way.
Yeah, that's excellent. Okay, we got time for a couple questions. Okay, right here with the beard.
I think, because I believe that God's gifted us in different ways, so I would take a personality test. I've done it. Like, oddly enough, it's called the Berkman test, Birkman. No, but it's BI. This guy, no joke, he's a doctor, and like it can tell you, like, this is where you're gifted, this is where you're bent. And so I would start to look for something, because, I mean, at the end of the day, we all want, I'm not saying you can't find significance in your work. Like, I think about that World Series when, quite often, and it still brings me tremendous joy to remember those times. And so I'm not saying that, everything you do is completely worthless. I think what we do for a living is very important, and I think God's gifted us in a certain way to do certain work, and we're designed to work. And so figuring out, like, okay, where do my natural talents and abilities lie, and how can I use those in a career? And then, how can I use the platform that I have for my career to help other people? So I think the key to significance is finding, not only, it's not just about like, read the Bible and go be nice to people. Yes, there's significance in that, but I do think guys are geared to work in certain fields. And I mean, you have to know yourself and know kind of what brings you joy and what gets you out of bed in the morning. Like, what would you do for free? And if you can figure out a way to make a living doing that, then I think that's a real step in the right direction towards significance.
That's great. Yeah, right here.
I'm an ENTJ, by the way, on that Berkman test.
Oh, yeah.
You talked about your Rice coach, and you've obviously played for other professional managers. What style of coaching influenced you the most, and what do you do with your student or your athletes, and as well as being a witness to them, as well as making them better baseball players?
Yeah, so I don't know that you can get away with, Coach Graham would probably be in prison if he coached today. Like, with the social media and stuff. And, when that stuff started to come in, he got to be about 85 years old, so he had sort of calmed down a little bit. But not when I played for him. But I actually, I respond well to that. I like that. Like, it's tough as it is, it makes you tough. Nobody gets tough by easy things. Like, you only get tough by doing tough things. And so when you have a coach that makes it tough on you, it kind of forces you into that mode. So I like that kind of coaching, but at the same time, I recognize, it's different. Like, I always sound like the old fogey. Like, back in my day, this is what happened, and there's a lot of us in that mode here that grew up with coaches that way. But I don't think I don't think you can get to kids as well with that style these days. I just see them shutting down more. The whatever this generation is called, like I think they do better when you explain why. They want to know why everything happens and, that sort of thing. So being patient, being willing to teach and not just yell at them, for a result, I think that's what we try to do. Now, I will get after their rear end if they're not playing with energy and concentration and the things that they can control. But in terms of, just the guy making an error or whatever, like we try to stay positive and we try to build into them that way. But I always appreciate the hard-nosed coach, and I'm sure, I would absolutely love to hear what our players would say about how we coach them, because we try to be more positive and we try to be more encouraging, but at the same time, I'm a big believer in a kick in the rear. I always say, can you run faster if you're running for an ice cream cone or if a German Shepherd's chasing you, So...
That is pretty good. All right. I tell you, I know you guys get more questions, but we're at the end of our time, so we better wrap it up. So you guys, how about a big, big thank you for Lance Berkman. Thank you.